So, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends and supporters of the Käte Hamburger Center for Advanced Study in Humanities, Laws, Culture, queridos amigos, benfeitores e visitantes do Käte Hamburger, colega em Bonn. Hoje estou muito ansioso por poder cumprimentar Dr. Patrícia Branco de Coimbra, em Portugal. Estamos todos muito prosperos de finalmente poder ouvir da jurisprudência portuguesa. Muito bem-vindo, Patrícia. Why are you please laughing so much? But before going into the presentation of her paper, I have to announce a further achievement of one of the center's members, Tim Shaw, our dear artist in residence, received the Jack Goldhill Award for Sculpture of the Royal Academy of Arts. During the summer exhibition of the Academy that was founded in 1768, the sculptor got this prize for his sculpture, Man on Fire, here to be seen. I still hold the invitation card in my hands. I forgot to show it to you because it's a real one that I did not use because I had a conference to give in Paris and at other places, and it became too much stress to be in time. But we'll celebrate the event when the artist will be back next week. So he now, of course, as it is the Royal Academy, he has to celebrate with the royal family, I suppose. And so in any case, that's a great event, it's a great achievement, and I think it's also a very interesting piece of art. And we'll see, work of art. We'll see with his clown project that he might join this, this very fascinating track. I come back to you. Let me come back to another sculpture. Woman sometimes on fire too, but in her controlled anger and sense of justice. There is no symbolic figure as closely connected to law as that of Lady Justice. Her depiction as personified justice are as varied as the interpretive approaches dedicated to her. I come back to the invitation text. After José González García authored an extensive study on this topic, The Eyes of Justice, and it will be rather soon available as a book in our series, The Eyes of Justice, Blindfold and Farsightedness, Vision and Blindness in the Ethics of Law. Patrícia Branco has developed her own approach from a legal feminist perspective. If I understood right, perhaps she will correct me that it is more not a feminist, but what is the contrary of a feminist perspective? It is the... we don't know how to say it in English. Male studies? I don't know. Whatever. During her fellowship at the Käte Hamburger Center for Advanced Study in the Humanities, she is investigating the architectural, visual and literary imagery of law and justice, and in her lecture, Interrogating an Allegory, Justice on Women and the Law Today, she will address two key questions related thereto. On the one hand, she will discuss the attributes and features generally ascribed to Lady Justice. From this basis, she will question, from a legal culture perspective, to what extent these ascriptions are formative for a modern image of women, if I understood right your proposition. This will be really a fascinating way to come from Lady Justice to the ladies in the world. This leads to very fundamental questions of how to represent the unrepresentable abstractness of an idea, of principles, or even of a whole normative complex that is behind Lady Justice. The law in the books is best presented by red books, I would say. Schoenfelders or others in other legal cultures, looking like Bibles, but the overthrowing idea of justice. Why she is a woman and not a man? If the law is, as psychoanalysis tells us so close to the father's role in society? Why is she even seductive, as if the sword would be funny? And why is she blindfolded? Because she is thought to be improved in her impartiality when she does not see or feel the object of her judgment? Is that not much more a problem for common law tradition, that refuses the whole judicial facts element to be part of the judgment because endangering, according to that view, the good and correct judgment? Are we really in front of a universal figure in the sea of a plurality of juristic cultures? Why do we still think that the figuration is a necessity after the death of myth and the disenchantment of the world? There is an ongoing production of this Lady Justice all over the world. Must we go so far as to revivify the legal tale of Jacob Grimm, one of the Grimm brothers, saying in The Poetics of the Law, that Laurent is translating into this crazy language of French this time? All languages are crazy. And you will have now a last example of craziness and linguistic craziness, and this is the wording of Jacob Grimm. Es ist eine unbefriedigende Ansicht, welche in solchen Symbolen bloße leere Erfindung zum Beruf der gerichtlichen Form und Feierlichkeit erblickt. Im Gegenteil hat jedes derselben gewiss eine dunkle, heilige und historische Bedeutung. Mangelte diese, so würde der allgemeine Glaube daran und seine herkömmliche Verständlichkeit fehlen. So he says, you might know this text, that those symbols are not just expressions of the formality of the law. In the contrary, there is a dark side, a holy side, a sacred side, and a subjacent meaning of those symbols. Whenever those meanings and symbols would not exist, the general belief in them would not exist, and their understandability. So the question is whether Lady Justice fulfills those criteria of understandability and to forge even a general creed and a general belief in the law and in legality by way of presenting that kind of figure. That would be one of the larger questions that I have in mind, but there will be a lot of other questions and we'll have the chance to discuss. First of all, once again, welcome for so many reasons. Do I really need to tell a little bit about your CV? You know, we have been in communication all the time, that you're in between many languages and many legal cultures, from Portugal to Italy, to Germany also, and to France. And so you are a socio-legal scholar of a very, very specific profile, I think more and more important for the future of the discipline and this kind, and this way I think about the juristic disciplines. So we were very glad when we were able, after the proposition of your project, to see that, for example, in this book that you edited, please.
It would be Sociology of the Spaces of Justice, Interdisciplinary Dialogues.
Dialogue, with a kind introduction of Jacques Comaille, who is the former president of our scientific council and who strongly committed and recommended by saying that you must take her in order to learn from her, and we'll do it now during your talk, and we are really keen to know more about this really ambiguous and sometimes a little bit dark Lady Justice. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you all. Muito obrigada. It's a pleasure to be here.
I have to thank Professor Gephardt and also all the fellows that with whom I have been in touch, and all the dialogues that we have had, and also the comments that were made during all these weeks, months. So it's really interesting, and I'm looking forward to your comments today. So as you can see, my title has already been told by Professor Gephardt. So it's Interrogating an Allegory, Justitia on Women and the Law. And my interest in this allegory came by chance, intertwined in the analysis of courthouse architecture. At the university, I didn't study the image of justice embodied in courthouse architecture, but I didn't study either the allegory of Lady Justice. As we know, the justice imagery is an ornament of the court spaces, an ornament that has become increasingly rare, especially when the image the decision makers want to give of justice is that of informality, computerization, bureaucracy, and speediness. The fact is that the imagery of justice still is a common and popular feature of different legal cultures in many parts of the world. And the prominent image that has affected us most is that of Justitia, or Lady Justice. From the Renaissance onwards, standardized images of Justitia became so omnipresent in courthouses, law books and law schools, and in a variety of forms including paintings, stained glass, tarot cards, stamps and product labels, that these representations developed a weight of a given, of a modern quasi-religious, quasi-political icon. We have learned to recognize the allegory, but in my opinion, we do not question it sufficiently. An allegory centuries old that has borrowed and made its own elements that have been lost in the foam of the days, or that have gained other meanings, different from what was originally intended. I will not analyze the history of this allegory, since others have done it before me, including here at the colleague José González Garcia. Every image we see of Justitia is a type of reproduction and repetition. However still or silent, it does not stand passive. She communicates to us. And it is what she communicates to us that I want to examine today. Different from Peter Goodrich's analysis of the legal emblems, my reference here will be contemporary and vernacular rather than classical. But, as he claims, we need to be a touch more irreverent when it comes to justice and the politics of law. This allegory has many layers of significance and of interpretation. As lawyers, we are usually more concerned with the meaning it has in terms of the ideal of justice and judgment. I want to look at other, perhaps more subtle meanings, hidden in those layers. Like in Joni Mitchell's song, I can say that things were quite well known, till I started analyzing and I wrote on my old ways, and then a thunderhead of judgment was gathering in my gaze. Thus, I intend in this presentation, with the use of some of the materials collected during fieldwork on courthouse architecture in Portugal, as well as images that colleagues and friends have sent me. And here I want to thank Morag, especially because she's sent me two images that I was really happy to have. And also other images that I found on the internet. And so to gaze at and question the allegory of Lady Justice, discussing some of her attributes in the 21st century, particularly the behaviors and expectations that are required and imposed upon women by the law, for women are still obliged to conform to ladylike stereotypes. And here I bring on my old ways by reporting to the researches I've been previously engaged in regarding gender issues and family law. And finally, I intend to place the Portuguese reality in a wider context, especially in a moment when, in Portugal, justice is directed by this group of women. It's the second time we have a female Minister of Justice, also the second time we have a head of the Lawyers' Bar, and it's the first time we have a female Prosecutor General and a female Minister of Internal Affairs. So I thought it would be very fitting to talk about Lady Justice. The images that were chosen as exemplary of the attributes that I want to examine here. There is also a connection to literature by way of Eowyn, a female character from The Lord of the Rings by Tolkien. And as you will notice, you already have noticed because I already used Joni Mitchell's example, there is too a sort of a soundtrack to this presentation, intimately connected to some of the attributes and characteristics that I will be discussing. As we know, Lady Justice guards the entrances to our historic courthouses, and stands as a statuary example of all that is good and worthy in our system of administering justice. Classically, Lady Justice is commonly shown carrying a set of scales and a sword, and since the 16th century often wears a blindfold. The scales are said to depict the balancing of arguments, the blindfold her impartiality, and the sword serves to illustrate the power of the state. The history of the scales, associated with divine judgment, allows us to trace the origin of modern images of Lady Justice, beginning with god Shamash in Babylonia, passing by Mat in Egypt, and embodied in Greek and Roman goddesses, Dike and Themis. And then the Romans coined, and literally coined, in coins, Justitia, and afterwards the justice imagery came to be entwined with the Catholic Church through Saint Michael, often depicted weighing souls and wielding a sword to slay Satan's dragon. By the Middle Ages, justice had become one of the 4 cardinal virtues fighting against the vices of humanity. In fact, Justitia appeared alongside prudence, strength, and temperance, as you can see from these images. So we have justice, we have prudence, strength, and temperance. And this quartet was often also represented with the Catholic virtues of faith, hope, and charity. Nevertheless, the remarkable longevity of Justitia has not been shared by her sisters. But who is this woman? Is she really a worthy representative of justice, of women? I argue that we are in front of a deceitful image. Look harder. Leave behind assumptions on the force of punishment, the balancing of values and interests, impartiality and neutrality. She is supposed to be a virtue, an ideal and an example of perfection. Look again at the woman. Look at her female body, her skin color. Pay attention to the fact that she is holding a sword. Lady Justice imposes expectations on women, be it as legal professionals, as victims, and as offenders. So, she is commonly represented as a woman. This has been an attribute seldom discussed. The personification of justice as a woman should be regarded as more than simply a remnant of the appropriation of certain attributes from Egyptian, Greek, and Roman goddesses. As Christian Robert points out, you need an abstraction, a female abstraction, to ensure the complete neutrality of an image. Käte also claims that representations of women were usually made by male artists, in which the desires, fantasies, and constraints of patriarchal culture were imposed on womankind. Women were used by male artists to stand allegorically for chastity, but they did so by becoming men or by denying the properties that men perceived as female. Warrior women would then stand for virtue because their bodies carapassed, they no longer tempted men. Now, until the Middle Ages, there was the cult of another female figure, that of Virgin Mary, the mother, mediator, and ideal of rightness, an omnipresent iconic symbol. There is an ambiguity in femininity, which is based on a system of conflicting representations, where the positive qualities recognized to the fair sex, that is motherhood, care, or mediation, are systematically offset by strongly negative characteristics, such as attraction, emotionality, imagination, or softness of character. Thus, one can say that this idea of femininity is linked to that of virtue, virginity, as well as maternity. On the other hand, agency, assertiveness, and rational choice. These are all male prerogatives that in a woman is seen as something to avoid. That justice is represented as a woman connotes further ironies, argues Peter Goodrich. One such irony was the re-emergence in the 16th century of the symbolization of justice as a blindfolded woman. How better to repress the body than by closing its eyes, enforcing it into an internal and dark world of the spirit, he asks. How better to figure the control or subjection of a woman and of her passion than by hiding her eyes from the vision of the law? Women, by virtue of their worldliness or reproductive force, were a threat to the temporal order of political sovereignty and the logic of law. According to Goodrich, the vice of femininity was precisely its nature, its plurality, both its diversity and its ability to reproduce, both its inconstancy over time and its production of difference.
Rebecca Lee also considers that the blindfolding would not have happened if justice had been figured as a man. So she gives the example of Saint Michael, who is always depicted open armed. And as she suggests, the blindfold was imposed on Lady Justice as a way to domesticate women, which would have to be done necessarily by rational men as rulers and creators of legal norms, and as judges and interpreters and applicators of set norms. Hence, rationality and logic are characteristics that have been seen as typically male. Take the example of Lady Justice on the facade of the Judicial Court of Vila Nova de Famalicão, built in 2007. This is, in my opinion, a really thought-provoking image, since Justice is depicted holding the scales and the sword. She's not blindfolded, but having in her dress the four phases of the moon. As in King Crimson's song, we could then say that perhaps the author was thinking that law has its contradicting views, justice has her cyclothymic moods, and they both make a study in despair. In other words, is this image pointing towards the existence of an unbalanced justice, one that is emotional, irrational, and hard to understand? Or on the contrary, that in addition to being logical and argumentative, justice needs to be sensible to the kind of matters at stake? On the other hand, I wonder if the author of such image wanted to point out exactly that justice, like a woman, is influenced by the phases of the moon and consequently by the menstrual cycle. We need to consider here that every aspect of the menstrual cycle has, at one time or another, been called upon to define women out from being competent participators in the world. As Judith Clark recalls, women were treated as eccentrics who did not understand scientific reality or the accepted rules. We cannot forget that hysteria was the first mental disorder attributed exclusively to women. And even today, women keep on being called hysterical when they rebel against an order or contest the rules. From 1950 onwards, the focus began to be on the menstrual cycle and associated theories relating to female deviant behavior. Thus, premenstrual syndrome began to be used either as a defense or as a mitigant factor in a number of countries, such as in the UK or Australia. The argument generally runs that women are suffering from diminished responsibility during these times, and thus have no or little or lesser control over their actions. As Easthill argues, those who are concerned with gender equality face a dilemma. Although they do not want the small number of severe premenstrual syndrome sufferers to be dismissed as neurotic or childless, the primary concern is that people might generalize from the few and negatively stereotype all women or all those who experience premenstrual symptoms. As we are aware, the feminine image of justice has served the exclusion of real women from the courts. We cannot forget that the physical spaces where justice is applied and administered, the courts, were spaces in which the law was administered by men, from legislators to judges, prosecutors, lawyers, and court officials. Linda Mulcahy also argues that the courthouses buildings with their columns suggest a masculine aesthetic, so we would have a lady justice living inside a palace of men. Out of curiosity, I observed the following trend. As women progressively entered different areas of justice, and thus courthouses, we could notice a decline and even an absence in terms of decoration and ornament in the spaces of the courts in Portugal, where the image of Lady Justice was replaced in most cases by the flag of the Republic. Another curious note is linked to the absence of women architects involved in the design of courthouses, even internationally, and I'm sure Maribel knows also this reality for France. Also regarding the issue of courthouse architecture, are we currently witnessing the transformation of a masculine aesthetic into a feminine one? Take the case of family and child courts in Portugal. Most of them have been installed since their legal creation in the 1970s in residential buildings. Now, family and children law and justice refer precisely to matters related to the private sphere, the domestic sphere, the home. Are we confronted with the domestication of these spaces of justice and through it, with a new downgrading of these matters, as we know that on the one hand, family and children justice has traditionally been seen as a minor justice? On the other hand, we also know that the procedures involving family issues and children are those where there are large numbers of women involved, be it as parties and also as professionals. Sorry. Let us, in this context of family issues, examine the image of Lady Justice in the Judicial Court of São Roque do Pico, in the Azorian archipelago, built in the 1980s. The building is not aesthetically interesting, as you can see. Nevertheless, it is located in the central square of the village and it offers a fantastic view of the ocean nearby. When we enter the hall, we are greeted by the image of a sperm whale, one of the animal symbols of these Azorian islands. And as we climb the spiral staircase to the first floor, where the court is located, we are faced with this image of Lady Justice, holding scales and a sword, again without the blindfold. There is also a panel alluding to the 10 Commandments, and two other panels, one on each side of Lady Justice, as illustrations of moral and upright behavior on the one side, and as opposed to unruly and immoral behavior on the other side. I'm sorry that the picture is a bit too dark, but here it's the moral behavior, and here the immoral behavior. So here we could make a brief parallel with Jotus, Justitia and Injustitia, especially the images beneath each of them. The first are scenes of two knights going off to hunt, some young women dancing happily to the sound of musical instruments, and two merchants heading to the city to sell their wares. Scenes that are the fruit of the justice that rules in the city. Beneath the figure of injustice, there are only scenes of death, desolation, and violence. Going back to the Portuguese Lady Justice. This image is all-pervading, since it accompanies us up the stairs, emerging at the higher level, and watches us as we wait in the waiting area that leads to the court registry and the courtroom. The image of justice in itself does not offer great comments. It's the two panels that flank it, which can be read as the positive and the negative of the photograph, that give us something to reflect upon. The panel on the right side shows the images in bas relief, so it's like this, showing a couple that makes their living out of the land, so you see the grapes, and also from the sea because there's the boat, the fishing boat. We also see the mother holding the child, the couple's child by the hand. This image conveys a very traditional meaning. The transmission of values linked to the ideal of family, made of the marital relationship between persons of different sex, and the vision of mother as the caregiver in compliance with the rules, legal and social. In turn, the panel that appears on the left side displays the images in a hologram. With two men who are visibly drunk and gambling, and the boat is seen overturned, which has to be read as a clear reference to immoral behavior, a behavior that goes against the rules. What is also clear in this panel is the absence of women. You see just men. As if their absence could be the cause of this man's immoral and dissolute behavior. And although Lady Justice does not seem to have a very striking figure, her gaze indicates the direction to follow, while the sword marks the reprehension of the bad deeds. On the, Justitia's posture is not passive or indifferent. On the contrary, her gaze is rather normative, imposing behaviors and admonishing sanctions. Furthermore, the panel alluding to the 10 Commandments is also worth mentioning, for it clearly states what people shall and shall not do. Our legal history further complicates Justitia's gender. As we are well aware, and these images definitely point that out, we live in a world that continues to see women as responsible for relationships and children. According to Levitt and Virtue, marriage and family form the anchor of a gendered social system that makes women vulnerable to exploitation and abuse. This vulnerability stems from the expectation that women are the primary caretakers of children, that will rely on the economic support of their husbands, and that will take care of most of the household, regardless of the fact that they also work outside the home. The law, either legislation or the judiciary, emerges thus as a false neutral, based on values of universality, equality, and neutrality. And under the cover of this apparent neutrality, it doesn't do much more than reproduce the status quo in place. From the study of a sample of 194 completed cases in 2010 regarding the regulation of parental responsibilities in two Portuguese family courts, one in Lisbon, the country's capital, and another one in Braga, in the north side of the country, we concluded that the custody of the children was assigned to the mother in the vast majority of cases, 77% in Lisbon and 72% in Braga. The predominance of custody cases assigned to mothers is associated by the respondents in this research, judges and lawyers, to the pre-existing societal gender inequalities, especially when it comes to the exercise of parental responsibilities, which was also reinforced by the ideology of the judges present in the analyzed decisions, where the judges stress the normal, the essential, and irreplaceable nature of maternal affective compensation, based, as was claimed in two of the decisions, in the current status of case law and in modern psychology. On the other hand, we cannot forget that women are still the object of male violence, especially inside the home. In 2014, domestic violence was responsible for a death per week in Portugal, and here read, a woman dead per week. The profile of these women fits the profile of many others, that of a mother, as well as married and financially independent woman. It is thus important to remember our legal history of indifference to issues of domestic violence. Alongside the stereotypes still reflected numerous judicial decisions, some of these women, because of some of their behaviors, were also somehow guilty of their death, guilty of non-complying with what was expected from them as women and wives. The legal system also continues to require that women, in accordance with the ladylike stereotype, resist sexual attack until exhausted or overpowered in order to establish rape, as was the case in 2011 with the decision by Portuguese Court of Appeal, when a psychiatrist, after having been declared guilty by the Court of First Instance, was then acquitted and declared not guilty of raping one of his patients, pregnant at the time of the event, because mere verbal refusal was considered insufficient to confirm the occurrence of the crime. Now, why arm a woman, one may ask? In the 16th century, it was unthinkable that a woman, even if she was an example of virtue, could wield a sword or adopt a warrior pose. Sword-bearing was, in fact, a privilege of nobility and citizenship reserved to men. The sword of the warriors, tough-bearded men, with all possible and imaginable traits of masculinity. Thus, swords are linked to the concept of macho. Macho means man, and particularly white man, and it implies both domination and protection of those under him, such as women. And by constructing people as non-macho, one assigns them the function of being dominated, which is quite ironic when it comes to Lady Justice holding the sword. Looking at the image of the warrior and woman, Lady Justice, it comes to my mind the character created by Tolkien, Allegory. In The Two Towers, published in 1954, Tolkien introduces Eowyn, a female character who plays a substantial role in the narrative of The Lord of the Rings. Eowyn's first appearance places her firmly within gender conventions and expectations. Her role is clear. As a woman, her place is in the home, watching over the needs of her uncle, King Theoden. She is also a shield maiden of Rohan, and she performs both of these roles faithfully, but much to the torment of her soul. What do you fear? Aragorn asks. A cage, Eowyn replies. To stay behind bars until youth and old age accept them, and all chance of doing great deeds is gone beyond recall or desire. This is an amazingly modern sentiment in a work by a male Catholic medievalist in his 60s, published recently after the English translation of Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex, where the idea of the cage is strongly connected to that of the female body. Needless to say, women in most Western countries only gain full legal capacity very recently. Nonetheless, our visual traditions of justice have their political roots in hierarchical, non-democratic states that tolerate inequalities. Excuse me, just a minute. Most times, certain categories of persons, in this case women, were excluded from the circle of rights and power. Which brings us to the restriction of access to academic and liberal professions related to the law. And the first parallel can be drawn here with Eowyn's case. In Portugal, it was only in 1918 that women were allowed to be barristers. It was only after the Democratic Revolution of 1974 that women could enter the judiciary in 1977. And 1954 was the year when, for the first time, a woman got a PhD in law. But she had to wait a decade so that she could teach. In Portugal, in the 21st century, there is an evident feminization of the judiciary. You cannot see it. I'm going to say the numbers. The latest data indicate that 58% of judges, 62% of prosecutors, 70% of auditors of justice, and 63% of justice officials are all female. While we witness a growing feminization in the law courses, there continues to be limited access to academic and influential positions. Although you saw some changes in one of my first slides, but yes, there is just a small change. And alongside the issue of access to the professions, there is also the question of unequal access to law and justice, unequal between men and women, but also uneven among women as well. Continuing the dialogue between Eowyn and Aragorn, the latter tells Eowyn that she cannot come on to the paths of the dead because her people need her. He basically tells her it's her duty to stay behind, something he would never say to her uncle or brother. And she calls him on it. She tells him, all your words are but to say, you are a woman, and your part is in the house. Eowyn's despair to claim a place among her male relatives as a warrior and hero is clearly evident, and she demands equality with men now that her obligation as her uncle's nurse are fulfilled. Like Eowyn, the first women who entered the legal profession were encouraged to leave advocacy to men. For, as it was argued, the court's work was a male thing, a gladiatorial arena little suited to the kindness of sex, or that women lacked a legal mind. In 1878, Clara Falls became the first woman to be admitted to practice in the state of California. But she attempted to disguise her refusal to be confined within female roles by explaining that a knowledge of the law of our land will make women better mothers, better wives, and better citizens. In 1894, Anna Khrushchev, talking about the first female lawyers in Italy and Belgium, claimed that they were rejected with the mocking pretexts of pregnancy, lactation, of the barrett hat that did not fit hair styling, the gown that was not suitable to the tournure. Nowadays, nevertheless, denigration still includes expressions by judges and fellow lawyers of traditional beliefs regarding the social role and nature of women, demeaning comments about women, statements about female counsels, or appearance that diminish stature as a professional in the eyes of litigants and witnesses. And most importantly, female lawyers have to face indirect discrimination that materializes in salary discrepancies, unequal opportunities in career advancement, the low number of women in leadership roles, and the confinement of female lawyers or judges to certain areas of justice, often the least lucrative. The work-family conflict is as well one of the greatest concerns of women legal professions. Most female attorneys feel that they do not have sufficient time for themselves and their families, and report high levels of stress in juggling their responsibilities. And here we can make a parallel with ladies' justice scales. And the question of feminism that Sabine Meyer asked. On the one hand, the scales call for gender equality. On the other hand, they recall us that women have to keep on balancing the values of having a family and pursuing a career. Even more so when it comes to one that relates to law and justice. Moreover, the question of motherhood is twofold. In some circumstances, it serves to reinforce the good qualities of female judges as mothers, as reported by Roberts in the Australian context, which of course does not explain why motherhood, as distinct from fatherhood, qualifies someone as a good judge or lawyer. Or on the contrary, this question of motherhood serves to reinforce the stereotype that having a family affects their professional performance, as argued by Duarte for the Portuguese context. Thus, this image of Lady Justice that Morales sent me is very interesting and quite fitting. Lady Justice as a female judge wearing a robe, but also as a mother of intractable children, which goes in accordance to the societal expectation that to be a good woman, a good mother, a woman lawyer must be physically present and that her career must be subservient to the needs of her children, and at the same time that her children interrupt her from her judicial obligations. As we know, in a subversive act of defiance or transgression, Eowyn disguised herself as a soldier and went to battle. The first female lawyers were transgressors too. Transgression is also present in this Banksy sculpture of Lady Justice, portrayed as a prostitute. Banksy used the Israeli model and transformed it in order to criticize the legal system and the British judiciary. And it raises questions, this image, especially on how the law has dealt with prostitution and prostitutes. But it has to do as well with the imposition of stereotypes linked to femininity and virtue, organized around two extreme poles: the sexually voracious woman and the asexual, respectable woman, which Banksy seems to condense into one. As several decisions in different countries have demonstrated, women who have had a variety of sexual experiences with a number of men, whether for money or not, are better targets for men who rape. That is, as long as they direct their actions at women in this category, men will gain lesser penalties for rape, whatever the circumstances of this crime. So, contrary to Lady Justice, these women's bodies were not carapassed, and they have tempted men, and thus cannot stand for virtue. We can consider here too the importance the law gives to biological filiation, especially when a child born outside of the wedlock is registered by the mother without mentioning the father. If on the one hand, one is aware and respects the importance of the best interest of the child, on the other hand, it is also important to consider how the law still regards women that decide to take care of their children on their own without a male partner. So when it comes to ex officio investigations of fatherhood, the sexual conduct of women is of primary importance to the court, even in the era of DNA exams. It is also worth mentioning a decision from 2014 by the Portuguese Administrative Supreme Court that reduced the amount of compensation decided by the lower court, which was to be paid by a hospital to a woman following a poorly made surgery with severe consequences on her sexual organs. The reduction of the compensation amount was based, the argument was that after the age of 50, sexuality doesn't have the same importance it has at a younger age. So this is a decision in line with the stereotype of a ladylike behavior of a sexual, respectable woman. But one element that I want to retain from this image, though, has nothing to do with the scales of the sword, but with her boots, Lady Justice boots, which made me think of Nancy Sinatra's song. So she says, "Now what's right is right, but you ain't been right yet. These boots are made for walking, and that's just what they'll do. One of these days, these boots are going to walk all over you." So I guess these lyrics could be used to examine the intersection between women and the law in a number of situations. Now going back to Eowyn. During the battle in Pelennor, Eowyn fought the Lord of the Nazgûl after Theoden had been hurt by it, which then threatened that no living man may hinder me, to which Eowyn, after taking off the helmet, replied, "But no living man am I. You look upon a woman, Eowyn I am." Another parallel is evident here. In order to gain access to the profession, whether as attorneys or judges, women had to adopt behaviors and attributes considered masculine. Wearing a gown, robe, or wig, as Eowyn wore the helmet, does more than neutralizing and thus professionalize the individual. According to what? The suit is the lawyer's uniform, and in wearing it, lawyers send out the message that conformity is their creed. A conformity that is also a masculinization of the female form, voice, and action. According to Fortnum, women in law are primarily constituted in corporeal terms, producing and reproducing dominant notions of masculinity and femininity, revealing how this binarism is invoked in an endeavor to retain the masculinity character of legal practice. So, probably the Nazgul isn't quite there yet. Eowyn's transgressive behavior and her resemblance to Lady Justice as a female warrior also raises another question. From the moment the law grants individuals a sexual identity, male or female, it does nothing more than consecrate an indisputed biological attribute. But isn't the law itself establishing as natural what would be a social construct? We could well explain law's resistance to absorb situations that fall outside the gender duality scheme, such as transgender persons, which calls into question the allocation of a gender identity based on the dichotomous distinction of male and female. Despite significant advances on the acceptance of homosexuality and transsexuality, the sexualization of the subject by the law remains an unequal act masked by the natural character of the allocation of gender, connected to gender expectations, which has also sustained the reading of lesbian women as masculine. Therefore, this image of the quite feminine ladies, liberty and justice, as a same-sex couple is really remarkable. In Portugal, same-sex marriage was legally consecrated in 2010. However, same-sex couples aren't allowed to adopt, which again brings back the question of family roles, motherhood, and gender stereotypes. Women's admission to the law was but the initial challenge to male exclusivity in the legal profession. The next significant hurdle confronting women was the search for employment. Women who secured legal work were often offered opportunities in low-status specialties deemed suitable for women, such as probate and family law. If initially family law was a market niche left open by male colleagues and seen as more suitable for female law practitioners, in a second moment from the 1970 onwards, family law offered the possibility of working from within a legal area where it was necessary to change rules and mentalities affecting the condition and situation of women. And here comes my last parallel with Eowyn. Recovering from her wounds in Gondor, she meets Faramir. It appears that she is tamed by him. However, with the downfall of Sauron and the end of the war, Eowyn's heart changes. She has come of age and can now embrace her femininity. But she doesn't simply submit to her culturally designated role as a wife. She embraces a native career as a healer. Let us again relate Lady Justice to the sword. When the Allegory was created, there was also an interdiction for women to touch armaments. And violence committed by women was seen as something horrible and to be feared. Associating the sword to the issues of masculinity, femininity also allows us to consider how the criminal women were seen and portrayed. After all, the sword is a weapon. Through time, crimes committed by women were generally perceived as less threatening than those committed by men, since men were expected to be violent and aggressive, and consequently, male deviation was seen as more intimidating, whereas women would be considered as inherently good or morally superior until the day they became victims of physiological, psychological, or adverse environmental influences. On the contrary, victims are women. Victimization corresponds to a certain essence of femininity. But don't we keep on assuming gender stereotypes? Are women always the victims of injustice? Or are they too perpetrators of that injustice? Just think of the wrongs committed by white women to black women and even to black men. Think of female officials in fascist regimes in Germany and Portugal. When roles are reversed, the deviation to the normal deviation that is male to perform crime, is accentuated. Therefore, the criminal woman is not only seen as having an anti-legal behavior, but also as going against gender expectations and roles. Going back to Lady Justice, and as claimed by Capers, Justitia has an attribute that is rarely commented on, her whiteness. Actually, her whiteness is seen as something of a given, something assumed. So this image of a black lady justice deserves our attention, as it transgresses her classical whiteness. She frees herself from it, as the broken slave chain shows, and calls into attention that, as many statistics show, it is only a few non-white women who pursue a career as attorneys or in the judiciary. When they wear the wig, women are not only cross-dressing as male, but non-white women are, in addition, cross-dressing themselves of another race. And if we consider the other spectrum of the mirror, statistics also show that race matters when it comes to perceptions of crime and imprisonment population, where again, female inmates are considered more trouble than men because they defy gender stereotypes. So I'm coming to the conclusion. Sorry. As we know, there were new rights in terms of family, parental and marital relationships, not only in terms of gender roles, but also the reconfiguration of gender and gender relations, and also in terms of working conditions and salary and multiculturalism that imposed its recognition into the public sphere. This recognition implies the reconfiguration of power and equality relations. We can argue, therefore, that the allegory of Lady Justice may not be adequate to represent a diverse population of right holders. So, some topics for consideration. Even when Justitia seems to leave aside her femininity, she imposes a role model on women. We thus face the question of gender roles and expectations linked to the ladylike stereotypes of virtue, the asexual and respectable woman, and motherhood. Secondly, life in the cage or wanting more than a husband and kids, and the complexity of conciliating career and family. So a new metaphor for the scales. Thirdly, the question of exceptionality. Women have suffered from the failure of the legal system to take them seriously, to grant to them the same allowance that exists extended to men. That of characters with full mental powers, with full human status, with the right to be regarded as human beings operating in this world. Thus, for women to be respected, they have to endure societal adversities and behave as exceptional, like Lady Justice does. 4. The masculinization of behaviors. The need to adopt a professional behavior or a way of acting and thinking as a man in order to be accepted as competent, be it as lawyers or, on the other side of the line, as offenders. At the same time, this masculinization of behavior is criticized because it's seen as going against socially constructed gender expectations. The virtuous Lady Justice imposes that women are delicate, and hence contrary to a legal or criminal mind. 5th, the visible underrepresentation of women at the top, of non-white women in the legal professions, and, on the other hand, the visible overrepresentation of non-white women in prisons. Also, the adversities different women have to go through. Thus, race, class, ethnicity, disability, age, and sexual orientation have also to be connected with gender. It is not that justice is always blind. It is that her blindness is sometimes selective and practiced, especially when it comes to matters of race. On the other hand, it is also imposed on her, particularly when it comes to gender violence. Which calls for a last question. Is it possibly the time to look for new images of justice? Perhaps in the end, if we were to seek Lady Justice at the dock and to interrogate her, we would come to the conclusion that she is no more than a social and cultural device that needs to be questioned and reflected upon. And to our question, she would merely reply, "I'm just a soul whose intentions are good, so please don't let me be misunderstood." Thank you.